Hey everyone, welcome back. We all hear about these trade wars and tariffs, right? But it's hard to figure out what it all means, like what the actual impact is on us.
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot of noise.
Exactly.
So today, we're going to do a deep dive into the potential economic fallout from President Trump's recent tariffs.
Ooh, tariffs, everyone's favorite topic.
Right. To really wrap our heads around this, we're going to go back in time a bit.
Time travel.
Kind of. We're going to look at the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930.
Okay, back to the past.
Exactly. Using the past to make sense of the present.
I like it.
We've been looking at some analysis from Victor Long. He's examined Smoot-Hawley, but in the context of what's happening in our economy right now in 2025. And, all this talk about a possible recession, it all ties together.
Yeah, recession, tariffs, trade wars, it's all connected. And I think that's what we're trying to do today. We're trying to cut through the noise and really understand the historical context.
Absolutely.
So no jargon, just the crucial lessons from history to help everyone understand what these trade policies could really mean for all of us, in the real world.
That's cool.
Okay, so let's rewind the clock. Take us back to 1930. What was the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act all about?
Okay, so picture this. 1930, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act gets signed into law. It dramatically raised tariffs, like we're talking huge increases, on over 20,000 different imported goods.
20,000? Wow, that's a lot. So what was the thinking behind that? Why did they do that?
Well, the intention, at least on the surface, was to protect American industries and farmers. They were already struggling at the time because the Great Depression was just beginning.
Okay, so the goal was to kind of shield American businesses and workers from this economic storm.
Exactly.
But it didn't exactly work out that way, did it?
It really didn't. And this is where it gets interesting. You see, those tariffs, they kind of acted like a starting pistol for a global trade war.
Oh, so it wasn't just the U.S. putting up walls. Other countries reacted.
Oh, big time, yeah. Other countries retaliated with their own tariffs. It was like a domino effect.
So everyone started putting up barriers.
Exactly. And this is what happened. U.S. exports plunged. We're talking more than a 60% drop.
Whoa, that's massive.
It was. And globally, total trade shrunk by roughly two-thirds.
Two-thirds? That's like the entire system just seizing up.
Pretty much. And unemployment in the U.S., you guessed it, it skyrocketed.
Ouch. So, historians still debate everything that caused the Great Depression, right?
Yeah.
It was a complex event.
Extremely complex.
But it sounds like there's pretty broad agreement that this Smoot-Hawley Act, it really poured gasoline on the fire.
It absolutely did. It made a bad situation drastically worse.
Right, basically choking international trade.
Exactly. Think about it. It disrupted the flow of goods across borders, which hurt American industries that depended on selling their stuff overseas. And Lung's analysis gives a really concrete example of this. Canada. They hit back with tariffs on U.S. goods directly in response to Smoot-Hawley.
Tit for tat.
Exactly, tit for tat.
Okay, so let's fast forward now almost 100 years to 2025. What similarities does Ling see between this historical mess and what President Trump has done with tariffs?
There are definitely parallels.
Yeah.
And they're pretty worrying. President Trump, he slapped some significant tariffs on imports, some as high as 25%.
25%? That's a big chunk of change.
It is, yeah. And these tariffs targeted major trading partners. We're talking China, Canada, Mexico, the European Union.
Basically all the big players.
Yeah, pretty much. And just like in 1930, these actions spooked the markets. And the economists, well, they started getting really nervous.
So it wasn't just a gut feeling, right?
No, not at all.
Lean's analysis points to some pretty specific economic forecasts that suggest there's a real and growing risk of a recession in 2025. And these forecasts link that risk directly to these new tariffs.
Exactly. We're seeing actual numbers. Goldman Sachs, for example, they've upped their estimated probability of a recession in the U.S.
And Moody's Analytics, I think I saw something about them too.
Yeah, Moody's has put that probability even higher. These aren't just guesses, They're using these complex economic models to try and predict what these tariffs will do to things like consumer spending and business investment.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty now. What were the immediate consequences of Smoot-Hawley back then? And what are we expecting to see happen now with these tariffs?
Well, the most direct impact is likely to be a big jump in prices for American consumers and businesses.
Because when you add a tariff onto an imported good, that cost gets passed along.
Right, exactly. And Leon's analysis suggests that we could see a really sharp increase in the average tariff rate in the U.S.
Okay, can you give us some specific numbers here? Like, how big of a jump are we talking about?
So the average tariff rate in 2024 was sitting at about 2.5%. But with these new measures in place, the projection for 2025 is a whopping 13.8%.
Wow, that is a huge jump, more than 5 times higher.
Yeah, more than 5 times. And Leung points out that it would be the highest average tariff rate we've seen since 1939.
1939. So we're talking about a potential six-fold increase in the cost of imported goods hitting everyone's wallets.
Right.
So what does that mean for the U.S. economy as a whole? Like, what kind of damage are we looking at?
Well, Leung cites estimates of an annual economic loss of around $109 billion for the U.S.
$109 billion.
Yeah, that's a massive number, and it really highlights the potential drag on the economy.
Yeah, it's not just a theoretical number.
No, not at all.
It means everyday families paying more for practically everything, from groceries to clothes to cars.
And it gets even more specific.
Oh.
There's a projection that the new tariffs on Canada and Mexico alone could result in an annual economic loss exceeding that $109 billion mark.
So just those two countries.
Just those two.
It's really hitting home, isn't it? And it's not just consumers who will feel the pinch.
Right.
What about specific industries, particularly those that rely on selling their products overseas?
They're definitely in a vulnerable position. When countries retaliate with tariffs, and they often do, they tend to target key export sectors. China, for example, has already imposed tariffs on U.S. agricultural exports, and this reduces demand for American products, which can lead to job losses and hardship in those sectors.
So we have this historical precedent with Smoot-Hawley and now all these worrying parallels in 2025. What's the general consensus among economists about where we're headed with these tariffs?
The prevailing view is that this current tariff strategy, it could very well trigger a recession in the U.S. in 2025. We've already seen some red flags like the stock market dips that followed the tariff announcements, and consumer confidence has been dropping as people worry about higher prices and uncertainty about the future.
But those who support these tariffs, including President Trump, they have a different perspective, right? What's their argument?
The argument is that these tariffs are a necessary evil, like a transition period. The idea is that they'll ultimately lead to a stronger and more self-sufficient American economy. By encouraging companies to produce goods domestically, here in the U.S., and reducing our reliance on imports.
So the goal is to bring jobs back and boost domestic production.
Exactly.
But that's where Smoot-Hawley really throws a wrench in the works, doesn't it? Because back then, the goal was also to protect American industries.
Exactly.
But it ended up causing widespread economic pain.
Yeah, Smoot-Hawley serves as a cautionary tale. It shows how erecting trade barriers can backfire spectacularly, leading to a downturn, not prosperity.
So similar justifications, potentially very different outcomes.
Potentially, yes. Now, Leung's analysis also brings in some really interesting research from economists Arnaud Costinot and Andrés Rodriguez-Clare.
Okay, what do they find?
Their research suggests that while international trade, it definitely benefits big economies like the U.S., the overall impact might be smaller than we often assume. Their work indicates that only a relatively small portion of every dollar Americans spend, like around 8 cents, goes directly to the cost of imported goods.
8 cents, huh? That's a surprisingly small number. It makes you wonder if maybe the impact of these tariffs wouldn't be as bad as some people are predicting.
That's a really important point. While the direct cost of imports might be relatively small, Costinot and Rodriguez-Clare, they're very clear. Tariffs aren't harmless. Even small disruptions to the flow of global trade can have significant negative consequences. Think about all this stuff we buy, phones, cars, clothes. They all have components from different parts of the world.
Yeah, global supply chains are incredibly complex.
They are. And tariffs can disrupt those chains, making production more expensive and less efficient. So it's not just about the direct cost of those imported goods, it's about the ripple effects, the trade wars. That's where the real danger lies.
So how do these seemingly small disruptions escalate into big economic problems? What's the mechanism there?
The main drivers are retaliation and a decline in business confidence. When the U.S. slaps tariffs on goods from another country, that country is likely to hit back with tariffs on U.S. goods, which hurts U.S. exports. That then leads to lower sales for American companies, potential job losses, and an overall slowdown in economic activity.
A vicious cycle.
Yeah, it can be. And then there's the uncertainty that tariffs create. Businesses get nervous, they hold back on investments, and that further dampens economic growth. So there's this sort of cascade effect. A small disruption can trigger a chain reaction that leads to bigger problems down the line.
So even though the upfront cost of imports might be a small part of what we spend, it's the knock-on effects that are the real cause for concern. The trade disputes and the uncertainty.
Exactly. And Lurong's analysis really emphasizes that President Trump's policies risk repeating the mistakes of Smoot-Hawley by provoking this kind of retaliation. And that could lead to steep drops in U.S. exports, job losses in manufacturing and other sectors, and a general economic slowdown.
So big picture, what are the main takeaways from Lurong's analysis and this comparison with Smoot-Hawley? What's the most important thing to remember?
The most striking similarity is that, just like in 1930, we're seeing tariffs being imposed with the stated goal of boosting the domestic economy. But both historical evidence and current economic analysis suggest that the outcome is likely to be the opposite. President Trump believes his policies will benefit America, but the lessons from Smoot-Hawley paint a very different picture.
So good intentions don't always lead to good results.
Especially when you're dealing with something as complex as global trade.
And how could these tariffs end up hurting the economy? What are the main mechanisms?
The main ways are by raising prices for consumers and businesses, by disrupting those complex global supply chains, by triggering retaliatory tariffs from other countries, and by creating market uncertainty that can stifle investment and growth.
And the worst case scenario, the thing that has a lot of people worried, is a recession, right?
Right. Ling Yan highlights the very real possibility that President Trump's tariffs could push the U.S. economy into a recession in 2025, a possibility that President Trump himself hasn't ruled out. The lesson from the Great Depression, and Smoot-Hawley really drives this home, is that protectionist trade wars rarely, if ever, have positive long-term outcomes.
So here we are in 2025, and the ghost of Smoot-Hawley is looming large. It's a reminder that good intentions aren't enough, and that messing with global trade can have unintended consequences.
Absolutely. And it highlights the importance of looking at history and its sound economic analysis to really understand the potential impact of the decisions being made today.
Couldn't agree more. So for everyone listening, here's something to ponder. We've talked about how the direct cost of imports might seem small when you think about where your money goes. But the indirect consequences, the retaliation, the hit to business confidence, the disruptions to supply chains, those can be far-reaching and really painful. Smoot-Hawley is a stark example of that. It makes you wonder what other historical economic events might offer insights into the challenges we face today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.
See you next time.